For the cake roll, you're basically going to have 3 bowls that you'll combine together. The yolks and sugar should look like this. Notice the light creamy color, and that's been whipped together. The egg whites have been whipped with the sugar, and they're to a nice stiff peak. I'm going to shake this off. And now I'm going to combine the yolks into the whites by folding them in. And I'll just pour a little bit in and fold that in. I don't want to deflate the egg whites as I fold that in, carefully using a rubber scraper. Notice that I'm going around and then cutting through to combine that. I'll add a little bit more, and I'll fold that in, cutting down and folding through. This is folding a liquid into egg whites. When I get the last bit of the egg yolks folded into the egg whites, then I will fold in the dry ingredients into this mixture, making sure that you're folding and keeping all of the volume that you've worked hard to create when you whip the egg whites. And you just do it in portions. You can see down at the bottom of the bowl if there are any portions that need to be worked in and folded in before you add the next amount of dry ingredients. Make sure that you're lifting from the bottom. Make sure that you're looking at the bottom of the bowl to get everything off the bottom and folded in by cutting through with that rubber scraper. Usually you can do it about in 3 batches, and then it will be complete. When you've incorporated all of the dry ingredients, your cake batter should look like this. It should still be light and fluffy, and you're going to put that into your prepared jelly roll pan for the cake roll. After the cake is baked, you're going to take it out of the oven hot and cut around the outside edge. If you've greased the pan properly, it's going to come right out. Remember that you used waxed paper on this cake, not parchment paper. There is a difference between waxed paper and parchment paper. Waxed paper has wax on it. Parchment paper has Teflon infused into the paper. Once you've cut around that outside edge, you're going to dust the top liberally with powdered sugar. This is what's going to keep it from sticking to the towel that we're going to roll the cake into. As soon as I have all of the powdered sugar on top of the cake, I get a clean towel, put it over the top of the cake, and carefully fold the edges under, and I'm going to flip the cake onto the towel. Once the cake drops out, you just simply remove the pan and then remove the waxed paper. You will then sprinkle this part liberally with powdered sugar, and then you're going to roll the cake up into the towel and cool the cake completely. Then you will fill it with the filling. So I just fold it like that and then roll the cake into the towel, and then we will refrigerate this. When it's cool, we will fill the cake. You guys are going to want this tool. This is an amazing tool. It's a strawberry slicer, but it can also be used to slice mushrooms. You can use it to slice eggs, and it's super easy to use. These strawberry fans have been created using this tool. Basically, you just take the strawberry, put it green side down, and I like to put one finger right here so that as I press down, it stops before I go all the way through. You could just do strawberry slices if you removed the stem and went all the way through, but we want to make a fan. So once I've gone that far, I just push it back through, and then I have a strawberry fan. When the cake roll is cooled in the towel, you're going to unroll it. If it cracks a little bit, it's not a big deal because you're just going to put the filling in and roll it back up. So there's our cake. You'll notice that it kind of wants to stay in a curved shape, and that's exactly what it should do. It wants to stay in a curved shape because you cooled it in a curved shape. If you had cooled it flat, then you would have a lot more cracking. So I spread the filling on, make sure that it goes out to all of the edges. Like I said earlier, you can fill a cake roll with anything. Softened ice cream was my grandmother Jensen's favorite, and everyone thought it was super fancy. Now what we're going to do is just roll this cake back up, this time without the towel. When you get the cake all rolled, it will look like this. You will transfer it to your serving platter, and then we are going to frost and garnish the cake. Carefully lift the cake and put it onto your serving platter. Make sure that your frosting is of the right consistency, though, so that it will be easy to spread. Now we're going to finish frosting the cake roll. If your frosting is a little bit too thick, go ahead and thin it with some water so that it's spreadable. Sometimes it's easier to put a thin coat onto the cake to get a crumb coating, and then that's where it picks up the crumbs, and then add the rest of the frosting so that you can make it look very decorative. The spatula that you're using, you can make some lines in it to make it look very decorative. Now we're going to garnish it with the strawberry fans that we've prepared. You can put those down the middle or around the sides. And we will also use a little bit of frosting that I have reserved in a freezer Ziploc bag with the corner cut off to put a little bit of chocolate frosting on the strawberries themselves. That just makes it a little bit extra special, making people think that you're even more of an extraordinary cook. So we're just going to use the Ziploc bag, the corners cut off, and we'll put just a little zigzag of frosting on each of the strawberries to just make it more decorative. And there's your cake roll. Lots of fun, easy to do. The breakfast strudel is super easy to make. We use puff pastry. Making puff pastry by hand is very time intense. We have our puff pastry here on a piece of parchment paper, and what you're going to do is cut strips. I've already done it on this side over here. You're going to cut strips all the way down one side. They're about 1 inch wide. You're going to cut it on both sides, and then we're going to make a braid. With puff pastries, you can fill it with anything you'd like. You could have an apple pie filling in a puff pastry. That would be like a dessert one. You could put frosting on the top. You could do an Alfredo sauce and have chicken in the middle. A lot of possibilities with puff pastry. This is our breakfast strudel, so we have a scrambled egg mixture that goes down the center. And there's a cheese topping that goes on top. The braiding is super easy. All we need to do is take one strip from the right, one strip from the left, and go down the length of the pastry, and that makes your decorative topping. And once again, it's very impressive to serve. You can put all sorts of fillings in it. This is awesome for if you want to have something really fancy for breakfast. You need to keep in mind that puff pastry needs to be kept frozen until you use it. And then make sure you take it out at room temperature according to the package directions. For lab, you'll do one puff pastry on one end of the parchment paper. You'll do the other on the other end of the parchment paper, and then you'll have to have a partner help you lift that up into your jelly roll pan for baking. After you have it all braided, what you're going to do is beat the egg with a tablespoon of water, brush the top of the puff pastry, and then any mistakes that you have that maybe it's not braided perfectly, it'll be covered up with the beautiful glaze that you have on the top and the cheese. So I just brush that liberally with the egg, and then I take my shredded Parmesan and sprinkle the top, and we're ready to bake. When the cream puff mixture has come to a boil, you're going to add the flour all at once and stir it like it owes you money. You got to stir it really, really hard. This is super thick, and it will continue to cook on the cooktop until it looks like Play-Doh. This is about the texture that it's going to look. After the last addition of egg, this is what your cream puff mixture will look like. The last step is to put the cream puff mixture onto a parchment-lined cookie sheet that has been sprayed with non-stick cooking oil. And then you'll bake these, and if you've done it correctly, they will puff up. You'll have a hollow middle. With the souffle, you want to make sure that you have the cheese sauce all cooked and ready to go before you begin beating the egg whites. I'm going to show you the different stages of beaten egg whites. So I'm going to turn this mixer on and I will beat it until these egg whites are foamy. If a recipe calls for egg whites beaten to foamy, this is what they look like. The goal of beating egg whites to foamy is just to combine the thin white with the thick white in the recipe. For the souffle, we actually will beat it farther than that. We're going to beat it to a stiff, but I'm also going to show you a soft peak. I'm now going to turn it on and we'll go to the soft peak stage. This is what the soft peak stage will look like. Remember that egg whites will beat much better if they're at room temperature. So to get eggs safely to room temperature, you will run them under hot water. Stiff peaks, you'll be able to scoop it up onto the beater. This is an example of stiff peaks. They form a peak that stands straight up and stays straight up. That's what we need for the souffle recipe. In the souffle recipe, you're going to cook the sauce until it's all combined, making sure that as you cook it, you're stirring the bottom so that you don't have any scorching occur on the bottom. You'll use the candy paddle to do that. I'm going to pour this very hot sauce out of the hot pan into an ice bath. The ice bath is set up by having a big metal mixing bowl with ice down in here, and I will pour the sauce into here. The advantage of using an ice bath is that it speeds up the process, and for lab, you need to speed up the process in order to finish on time. Use a rubber scraper to get everything out of the bottom of that. Hopefully, if you've cooked it correctly, you will have no scorching at the bottom. Now I'll fold the cheese sauce mixture into the egg whites very carefully, making sure that I don't deflate the egg whites. Pour about 1/3 of the mixture down into the egg whites. The sauce should be slightly warm, not hot. If it's hot, it will cook the egg whites and your souffle will not work out. Then you can add a little bit more, making sure that you don't deflate those egg whites. Add it very, very gradually. If you've done this correctly, you'll have a beautiful souffle that rises above the top of the souffle dish. Fold in the last of the egg whites and then gently put the souffle batter into your souffle pan that you have prepared by greasing just the bottom of the pan, not the sides. It needs the sides ungreased so that it can climb up the sides and you'll have a very full souffle pan. Hopefully it rises over the top of the pan. Once the souffle comes out of the oven, it will be nice and tall and fluffy, but it will begin to fall immediately. So make sure that your guests are all around the table and they are waiting for you, not you waiting for them. So we've got the souffle that's all finished, the cake roll that's all finished, and the breakfast strudel that is all finished.